In early spring of 2025, a hush fell over the marble-walled Supreme Court chamber as Chief Justice John Roberts took his seat behind the long, polished bench. For most people, the Supreme Court was a place of grave decisions on constitutional law, far removed from the glitz of Hollywood. But today, the man at the center of attention was none other than action star legend Chuck Norris. He stood at the rail, his broad shoulders squared, facing a claim that threatened both his sterling reputation and his bank account. The corridors outside buzzed with journalists and camera crews, all eager to catch a glimpse of the martial arts master who had long been famous for his on-screen toughness and unbreakable spirit. Few could imagine how the quiet dignity of the High Court would collide with the bold persona of a movie icon. Just days before, Titan Fitness, a company known for its high-end workout equipment and supplements, had filed a lawsuit against Norris. The company alleged that the star had abandoned a lucrative endorsement deal at the final hour, causing them to lose millions in marketing and production costs. Titan claimed they had already printed promotional materials, shipped products labeled with his name, and scheduled an elaborate launch event. According to Titan's filing, the actor's sudden change of heart left them scrambling to rebrand, and they sought $150 million in damages. In Norris's corner, his legal team argued that the actor had discovered troubling practices within Titan's marketing strategy, practices that he believed could mislead customers about the safety and effectiveness of their supplements. When Norris refused to participate, Titan responded with legal force. Word that the case would land before the Supreme Court was met with disbelief. Normally, celebrity contract disputes were handled in lower courts, not on the nation's highest bench. But the legal question went beyond a simple breach of contract. It raised fundamental issues about free speech, consumer protection, and corporate responsibility. Chief Justice Roberts, known for his careful restraint and thoughtful opinions, had decided that these broader matters were worth examining at the highest level. For Norris, the stakes were enormous. A ruling against him could cost $100 million or more and set a precedent that might limit the rights of public figures to speak out. For Titan, a favorable decision would reinforce the power of corporations to enforce their contracts to the fullest extent of the law. As the session began, the packed courtroom held its breath. The justices sat in solemn concentration, their black robes draped over the bench like quiet sentinels of the law. Roberts called the case, and the attorneys rose. At the defense table, Norris himself sat stoically, hands folded, dressed in a dark suit that contrasted sharply with his trademark rugged image. Though he rarely appeared in person for legal matters, usually sending his attorneys in his place, he had felt the weight of the charges deeply. This was more than a business dispute. It was a matter of principle. In the front row, his wife and a handful of close friends watched anxiously. Their faces were a mix of pride and concern as they prepared to see him face the High Court. The attorney for Titan Fitness spoke first. She described the meticulous planning that had gone into the endorsement campaign, storyboards for television commercials, detailed product testing, and exclusive launch events in major cities. She emphasized how Norris's name and image were central to their strategy, calling him a symbol of strength and trust. The attorney painted a picture of a company blindsided by Norris's withdrawal, forced to cancel contracts with sponsors and distributors and left with boxes of unsold merchandise. This is not just a financial loss, she told the justices. It is a breach of faith between a company and its public figure, and it undermines the very notion of contractual reliability. When the defense attorney rose, the courtroom shifted. He spoke in measured tones, laying out Norris's side of the story. He explained that, in the weeks leading up to the planned endorsement, Norris had become aware of internal Titan communications, indicating that the company intended to market their nutritional supplements with claims that lacked solid scientific backing. Some documents suggested exaggerated promises, boosting athletic performance beyond what any supplement could deliver, and downplaying potential side effects. Norris, a vocal advocate for honesty and safety, had insisted on seeing the full data. When Titan representatives refused to provide it, he believed he could not in good conscience attach his name to their products. As the defense attorney continued, Norris remained calm, his steely gaze fixed on the bench. He had earned his fame through discipline and moral clarity, values that had guided him since his early days as a martial artist. To him, personal integrity was worth more than any paycheck. He had helped design a line of fitness equipment before, ensuring every claim was backed by research. If Titan would not meet that same standard, he could not allow his reputation, and by extension, the trust of his fans, to be tied to false promises. The attorney paused, letting the weight of that decision settle over the room. Questions from the justices followed. One justice asked whether Norris had any contractual right to review internal marketing plans before finalizing the deal. The defense attorney acknowledged that the contract had not explicitly granted that right, but argued that the law recognized a partner's right to rely on truthful representations. Another justice pressed Titan's attorney on why the company had refused to share data. She replied that their proprietary research was confidential and that Norris had no clear legal entitlement to it. The exchange underscored the tension between corporate secrecy and individual conscience. Outside, news feeds exploded with commentary. Legal experts speculated on whether the Supreme Court would focus on contract law or venture into First Amendment territory. Social media lit up with memes casting Norris as both cowboy hero and corporate whistleblower. Fans rallied behind him, under the hashtag #JusticeWithChuck, while detractors accused him of playing the celebrity card to dodge financial obligations. Through it all, Norris remained silent. He preferred action over words, and now he was letting his principles speak. For him, by mid-afternoon, the oral arguments concluded. Chief Justice Roberts, his silver hair catching the light through the high windows, cleared his throat and reminded everyone of the court's duty to interpret the law impartially. He did not indicate which way he might lean. As the gavel came down, the courtroom emptied slowly, each person lost in thought about the collision of Hollywood glamour and the solemn halls of justice. For Norris, the day had been a test not of his physical strength, but of his resolve and reputation. He exited the chamber without comment, stepping into a waiting car to begin the long wait for a decision that could reshape the balance between celebrity endorsements and corporate power. The unlikely courtroom showdown had captured the nation's imagination. It showed that even legends like Chuck Norris could find themselves in the cold grip of legal conflict, and that the Supreme Court, though distant from red carpets and blockbuster premieres, could become the stage for drama as intense as any blockbuster. As the sun dipped low over Washington, the world waited to see how Chief Justice Roberts and his fellow justices would decide whether to uphold Titan Fitness's claim in full, protect the sanctity of contract, or recognize the right of a public figure to demand honesty from the companies that profit from his name. In that silence, the true stakes of the case became clear. More than money, more than fame. It was about who had the power to shape truth in the marketplace, and whether one man's conscience could change the rules of the game. In the years before that tense morning in the Supreme Court, Chuck Norris had lived a life that seemed scripted for the big screen. Born Carlos Ray Norris in 1940, in a small town in Oklahoma, he grew up the youngest of 3 children. His family moved often, chasing work wherever it appeared. Chuck's childhood was marked by long stretches of hard labor on farms and in factories, but he always found ways to challenge himself. By the time he reached adolescence, he discovered martial arts, and everything changed. He recalled the first time a karate teacher showed him a simple block and punch. In that moment, Chuck saw not just self-defense but a path to discipline, focus, and respect. He practiced for hours every day, breaking boards and mastering kicks driven by a personal code. Never strike unless necessary, always stay humble, and treat others with kindness. As Chuck's skill grew, so did his competitive success. In the 1960s, he won national karate championships and began teaching classes in Texas. His students admired not only his strength but also his humble way of relating to them. He never boasted, and he made a point of learning each student's name and personal story. Word spread, and soon martial arts studios from coast to coast invited him to lead seminars. It was during a demonstration tour in California that a film scout spotted him. That meeting led to his first movie role, and from there his Hollywood journey took off. Chuck's film career blended action and a relatable, down-to-earth humor. Audiences loved seeing a hero who could jump through windows, run across rooftops, and deliver wisecracks in equal measure. Stallone and Schwarzenegger may have dominated the action scene, but Chuck Norris carved out a unique niche. He was the everyman with exceptional abilities, someone audiences trusted. He often wove his personal values into his characters: fairness, loyalty, and standing up for the underdog. As his popularity grew, companies saw in him not just a strong image but a trustworthy brand. When Chuck endorsed a product, people believed him. Sales would spike almost immediately. Building on that trust, Chuck began selectively partnering with fitness and health brands. He once collaborated with a sportswear company to design a line of martial arts uniforms that featured reinforced stitching and moisture-wicking fabric. He visited factories, met engineers, and insisted that every promise on the label be backed by real testing. When the uniforms hit the market, they sold out within weeks. Chuck reveled in the process. To him, teaming up with a company was like a partnership. Both sides had to uphold their end of the bargain. If he vouched for a product, he expected it to meet his exacting standards. When Titan Fitness approached Chuck with a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal, it seemed like another natural fit. Titan was a major player in gym equipment and supplements. They offered Chuck a package that included not just cash but equity in the company and a chance to influence their new wellness line. Initial discussions focused on how his image would appear in ads, pictures of Chuck doing high kicks beside treadmills, motivational quotes overlaying protein shake images. Titan's marketing team painted a picture of a health revolution led by Chuck Norris himself. But after the preliminary contract was signed, Chuck began hearing whispers of trouble. A former Titan employee reached out, expressing concerns that the company intended to exaggerate the benefits of its new supplement blend. Rumors said the marketing department planned to claim the product could speed muscle recovery by 50% and boost energy levels indefinitely. Chuck, who believed strongly in honesty, asked Titan for the scientific studies supporting those claims. The company said its data was proprietary and refused to share it. That response unsettled him. Over the next few weeks, Chuck's team dug deeper. They looked for independent research on Titan's supplement ingredients and found only modest evidence for modest effects. There was nothing to back up the bold promises Titan planned to make. Concerned, Chuck sent a letter to Titan's CEO, requesting full disclosure of the studies and clinical trials. He emphasized that he would only move forward if the company could show real science behind its marketing. Titan's lawyers replied that the contract did not obligate them to share confidential information. They asserted that Chuck had agreed to promote the product as described, and any refusal would constitute a breach. That moment marked the beginning of the breakdown. Chuck felt torn. On one hand, this deal represented a significant financial opportunity and a chance to shape a product he believed in. On the other hand, he could not in good conscience become the face of a campaign that relied on potentially misleading claims. He reached out again, offering to work with Titan's research team under a strict non-disclosure agreement that would protect their secrets while allowing him to verify the data. Titan declined, citing legal and logistical hurdles. Chuck's sense of integrity overrode his eagerness. He told his advisors he could not proceed without transparency. When Chuck announced his intention to withdraw from the endorsement, Titan responded with shock and anger. They claimed he was reneging on a clear agreement, forcing them to halt advertising, reprint millions of labels, and cancel sponsored events. Their legal team contended that Chuck's departure would cost the company dearly, not only in immediate expenses, but also in lost consumer trust. Titan's CEO publicly accused Chuck of tarnishing our reputation and abandoning a trust-based partnership. The headlines painted Chuck as a capricious celebrity who abandoned a deal for trivial reasons. In private, Chuck's friends and family urged him to compromise. Some warned that a public legal battle could damage his legacy. But Chuck listened to a different voice, the one that had guided him since the days of breaking boards in a dusty dojo. He believed that long after the trial's glare faded, people would remember whether he stood by his principles or chose money over truth. To him, personal character was a lifelong project, not a negotiable clause. Legal notices flew back and forth. Titan filed a breach of contract suit seeking $150 million in damages. Chuck's team countered with a claim for declaratory relief, arguing that Titan's failure to disclose essential data amounted to misrepresentation and relieved him of his obligations. By the time the documents reached the Supreme Court, the story had transcended a simple celebrity endorsement dispute. It had become a debate over how much power a corporation could wield over claimed science, and whether public figures retained the right to demand honesty before lending their names to products. In the end, the contract breakdown was more than a failed business deal. It was a clash between two visions of trust, one rooted in complete transparency and moral clarity, the other in protecting competitive advantage through secrecy. For Chuck Norris, a man whose life had followed a path of discipline and directness, the choice was clear. He would walk away rather than compromise his reputation or the trust of his fans. Little did he know that this decision would bring him face to face with Chief Justice John Roberts in a courtroom where the stakes extended far beyond dollars and cents. In that arena, Chuck's values would be tested under the highest scrutiny, and the world would watch to see whether one man's conscience could challenge the power of a corporate giant. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Supreme Court chamber as Chuck Norris and his legal team took their seats. The marble walls gleamed softly, and the high ceiling arched overhead like a silent guardian of the law. Reporters crowded the gallery, cameras poised on tripods while spectators in the balcony whispered in hushed tones. For Chuck, this was far from his usual battleground of movie sets and training studios. He had never expected to stand before the 9 justices of the highest court in the land. Yet here he was, ready to defend not only his choices but the principle of honesty he had championed his entire life. The case began with Chief Justice John Roberts calling the attorneys to the podium. His voice was calm and measured, carrying easily across the chamber. He reminded everyone that the court's purpose was not to settle personal grudges or hand out celebrity justice, but to interpret the law. Still, he acknowledged that this dispute involved more than a simple contract. It raised questions about consumer protection, free speech, and corporate accountability. As Roberts spoke, Chuck felt a flicker of respect. He had always admired the justices' steady approach to the Constitution, and now that steadiness offered a glimmer of hope. Titan Fitness's lead counsel rose first. She spoke with confidence, articulating how Titan had devoted months to crafting an endorsement campaign around Chuck's reputation. She described in vivid detail the commercials scheduled to air during primetime television, the billboards waiting to be unveiled on city streets, and the social media influencers hired to share the message. Under her narrative, Chuck's name was more than a brand. It was the engine that would drive sales and inspire customers to trust Titan's products. She emphasized that when Chuck walked away at the last moment, Titan was left with no time to recover. Thousands of protein shake containers sat on warehouse shelves, and contracts with gyms and retailers had to be abandoned. The company sought $150 million damages, she argued, not out of greed but out of fairness, and to deter others from flouting clear agreements. As she spoke, Chuck listened intently. He heard the frustration in her words but also sensed an unspoken assumption that his fame made him a commodity rather than a person. When she finished, the courtroom murmured, and the defense attorney approached the lectern. His voice was quieter, but firm. He began by acknowledging Titan's preparations. He agreed that Titan had invested heavily in the campaign, but he insisted that investment could not override the basic right to truthful communication. He recounted how Chuck had discovered Titan's plan to advertise benefits that lacked solid, scientific proof. He explained that Chuck, as a public figure whose name carried weight, felt responsible to his fans and customers. He could not lend his credibility to claims that he believed were misleading. The defense attorney paused, letting the point settle. Then he described the private efforts Chuck had made to verify the science behind the supplement. He spoke of lengthy meetings with Titan's research department, of requests for clinical data, and of Chuck's willingness to sign non-disclosure agreements to protect Titan's secrets. He painted a picture of a man not seeking to renege for personal gain, but striving to uphold his own standards of honesty. The attorney concluded by arguing that under contract law, a party misled by unverified representations has a right to withdraw. Chuck had acted reasonably, he said, by demanding transparency before endorsing the product. The justices leaned forward, their faces expressions of thoughtful scrutiny. One justice, known for her sharp questioning, asked Titan's counsel why the company refused to share its research. Titan's attorney replied that the data were proprietary trade secrets, developed at great expense, and that exposing them, even under strict confidentiality, would risk leaking valuable information to competitors. The justice pressed further. Could Titan not show enough to satisfy Chuck's concerns without revealing every detail? Titan's counsel held firm, saying the contract did not require disclosure, and that disclosing any information beyond what the law mandated would undermine the company's competitive edge. Next, a justice turned to Chuck's side. He asked whether contract law provided a clear right to information about marketing claims. The defense attorney acknowledged that the standard contract did not guarantee such right. Yet he pointed to consumer protection statutes that barred unfair or deceptive marketing practices. He contended that if Titan intended to market in a deceptive way, the law allowed Chuck to withdraw to avoid complicity. In this view, Chuck's demand for truthful marketing was not an extra-contractual wish but a legal safeguard. The justice nodded thoughtfully and moved on to a question about timing. Why had Chuck waited until the final hour to raise his concerns? The attorney explained that Chuck had trusted Titan at first. He believed they would honor scientific integrity. But when rumors and leaked memos confirmed his fears, he had no choice but to speak up, even at the 11th hour. Throughout the back and forth, Chuck sat stoically, his hands resting lightly on the table. Behind him, a handful of friends and family exchanged worried looks. They knew how principled he was, but they also feared the immense power of a corporate legal team. Still, Chuck's calm presence seemed to steady the room. When his attorney finished, Chuck stood to speak. His voice, low but clear, filled the chamber. He spoke of his lifelong commitment to honesty and safety. He recalled early days teaching martial arts, where the golden rule was, use your strength only to protect, never to deceive. He told the justices that he had felt a deep responsibility to anyone who would trust his name. If I promote something, he said, I want to know it works as claimed. His words struck a chord. The justices listened in silence, their expressions unreadable. After Chuck sat, Titan's counsel rejoined to argue one final point, that allowing a celebrity to back out based on personal doubts would open the floodgates to endless litigation, making contracts less reliable. The defense attorney countered that contracts always contained implied obligations of good faith. If one party intended to mislead, the law should protect the aggrieved party's right to step away. He urged the court not to close the door on accountability. When all arguments concluded, Chief Justice Roberts asked both sides to submit briefs addressing specific questions about the balance between contract sanctity and consumer protection. He thanked the attorneys and closed the session for deliberation. The attorneys gathered their notes and Chuck offered a small nod of gratitude to his team. As they filed out, reporters hurried to capture his first reaction. Chuck paused at the door, looked back at the bench, and simply said, "Thank you for listening." Then he walked down the steps into a swirl of flashbulbs and shouted questions. Outside the courtroom, the sun shone brightly, but the day felt heavy with anticipation. News outlets described the hearing as historic, debating whether the Supreme Court would side with corporate confidentiality or personal conscience. Legal commentators dissected every moment, predicting possible outcomes. Social media trended, with two camps, one praising Chuck's stance for integrity, the other warning of a slippery slope that could undermine all contracts. Yet through the noise, Chuck remained focused. He knew that the justices would take time, weeks, perhaps months, to craft their opinion. Until then, all he could do was trust in the judicial process. Back at his hotel, Chuck reflected on the hearing. He felt pride in how honestly and respectfully his side had presented their case. He also felt humbled by the gravity of the occasion. This was not a film set, with scripts and stunt doubles. This was real life, with real consequences for countless others, consumers, companies, and public figures alike. He thought of the students he had taught, the fans who looked up to him, and the people who believed in him. He hoped that the court's decision would affirm the simple idea that truth matters, even if it meant walking away from a deal worth millions. As evening fell, Chuck returned to his room and quietly practiced a few kata, the formal sequences, of his martial arts. Each movement was deliberate, each breath controlled. It reminded him that discipline was not just physical strength, but clarity of mind and integrity of spirit. In those silent motions, he found calm. He knew that whatever the court decided, he had stood by his principles. And in his heart, that was a victory more important than any financial settlement. The morning of the decision arrived like a calm before a storm. Chuck Norris sat in a small waiting room just off the Supreme Court chamber, flanked by his legal team and a few close friends. The room was quiet except for the soft shuffle of papers and the faint echoes of footsteps in the hall. Every so often, someone would glance toward the door where Chief Justice Roberts would emerge with the court's ruling. The weight of the moment pressed on Chuck's shoulders, yet he remained composed, his calm presence a testament to years of martial arts training and personal discipline. When the door finally opened, a clerk walked in, holding a thick stack of papers sealed with the Supreme Court's emblem. The clerk's expression was neutral, as if carrying any other document. Chuck rose to his feet, his eyes locked on the clerk's hands. His heart pounded, but he kept his breathing steady. As the clerk approached, he handed a copy of the opinion to Titan's counsel, and then to Chuck's attorney. The two lawyers exchanged a quick, respectful nod before they all returned to their seats. No one spoke. The air hung heavy with anticipation. Chief Justice Roberts took his place at the bench. He looked out at the packed courtroom where reporters, spectators, and court staff waited in hushed silence. Roberts's silver hair and dark robe contrasted with the pale marble behind him. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat once, twice, and then began to speak. His measured voice carried through the chamber, drawing everyone's full attention. After careful consideration, Roberts said, the court finds that Mr. Norris did enter into a valid contract with Titan Fitness. The court recognizes the investments made by Titan in reliance on that contract, including marketing expenses and production costs. Chuck felt a tightening in his chest at those words, but he steadied himself. Roberts continued, acknowledging the defense's argument that Mr. Norris genuinely believed the company intended to make misleading claims. However, Roberts said, the contract does not grant the right to unilateral withdrawal based on subjective concerns without explicit provisions allowing for review of proprietary data. The justice paused, letting his words resonate. Roberts then announced the financial penalty. He declared that Mr. Norris was liable for $100 million in damages. The number echoed like a thunderclap in Chuck's mind. Titan had originally sought $150 million, but the court chose a slightly reduced figure. For Chuck, $100 million remained a jaw-dropping sum. He held his ground, his face steady, though inside he felt a surge of regret at the cost of his integrity. Titan's counsel allowed themselves a moment of relief, but their expressions remained controlled. This was, after all, a legal victory, not a moment for celebration. Then came the moment that would be replayed in news clips and social feeds for weeks. Chief Justice Roberts continued, his tone softening ever so slightly. He looked directly at Chuck Norris and said 6 words that stopped everyone in their tracks. But I'll see you in victory. The courtroom stirred. Those 6 simple words shifted the atmosphere from finality to possibility. They hinted at an openness in Roberts's mind, a suggestion that the story was not yet over. Roberts explained. He said that while the court had to uphold the clear terms of the contract, the principles of due process and fair dealing remained vital. He suggested that Mr. Norris might have recourse if evidence emerged that the company had knowingly misled him. We encourage, Roberts stated, further proceedings in the appropriate form should such evidence come to light. With that, he closed his opinion, thanked the attorneys for their thorough work, and adjourned the session. In the moments that followed, reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward Titan's lawyers and Chuck's team. The courtroom emptied quickly. Chuck stood quietly, absorbing the whirlwind of reactions. His attorney placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You did what you believed was right," the lawyer said. Chuck nodded, words failing him. Outside on the steps, camera crews and reporters jockeyed for position. Questions flew. "Mr. Norris, how do you feel about the fine?" "Chief Justice Roberts said he'll see you in victory. What does that mean to you?" Chuck paused, gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke, his voice calm but resolute. "I respect the court's decision. I acted on principle. If new facts come to light, I remain ready to defend my integrity." News vans snapped photos as Chuck climbed into his car. The media spectacle was already boiling over. Talking heads debated whether the court's suggestion of further proceedings opened the door for an appeal or investigation. Legal experts weighed in on the unusual nature of Roberts's parting words. Social media lit up with memes portraying Roberts and Norris as duelists in a Western standoff, 6-word messages exchanged like dueling pistols. Back at his hotel, Chuck gathered with his closest advisors. They pored over the court's opinion, dissecting every paragraph. They noted the explicit invitation to pursue additional evidence of Titan's marketing conduct. The team agreed to investigate leaked internal memos and consult independent labs to test the supplement's claims. Chuck, ever the strategist, saw opportunity in Roberts's words. He believed that uncovering proof of deception would justify his conscience-driven stance and possibly overturn the fine. Meanwhile, Titan Fitness held its own high-level meetings. The company's executives celebrated the ruling but bristled at the suggestion that they might have knowingly misled their star endorser. They reviewed their marketing materials and research protocols, determined to shore up their defenses in any subsequent proceedings. Titan's board authorized an internal audit to demonstrate their commitment to scientific integrity, even as they prepared for potential new litigation. The balance of power, once tilted toward them, now felt precarious. In the days that followed, public interest in the case reached a fever pitch. Late-night comedians riffed on the odd pairing of a Supreme Court hearing and Chuck Norris, the martial arts icon. Editorial pages ran essays on the broader implications. What does this case say about celebrity endorsements, consumer trust, and the limits of contractual obligations? Universities announced symposiums to debate the interplay between contract, law, and consumer protection. Chuck found himself invited to speak at a forum on ethics in advertising, a role he embraced despite the controversy. Throughout it all, Chuck maintained his usual routine. He rose early, practiced kata in his hotel room, and spent hours in meetings with investigators and legal experts. He felt energized by the court's nod to further inquiry. If there was truth to uncover, he wanted to find it. He also used his downtime to record videos for his foundation, emphasizing transparency and honesty in business dealings. In one clip, he said directly to his followers, "Trust is earned through truth. Never let anyone buy your silence." On the 30th day after the decision, new evidence emerged. A former Titan marketing executive came forward with emails, suggesting that upper management had pushed for exaggerated claims, aware that scientific support was thin. The executive provided documents that matched the patterns Chuck's team had suspected. The revelation sent shockwaves through media, outlets, and legal circles. Under pressure, Titan agreed to joint mediation with Chuck, aiming to avoid another costly court fight. Through mediation, Chuck and Titan reached a settlement. Titan agreed to a formal correction campaign, paying for retracted advertisements, and funding independent studies to verify product claims. Chuck agreed to donate his portion of the fine, now reduced to $20 million, to a foundation supporting scientific literacy and consumer rights. Both sides issued a joint statement, praising the mediation process and acknowledging the importance of honesty in marketing. Chief Justice Roberts's 6 words had proven prophetic. There had been a path to victory after all, not the kind measured in dollars, but a triumph of principle. In the end, The saga became more than a legal dispute. It served as a reminder that contracts are not just dry documents, but pacts of trust built on shared values. Chuck Norris emerged not only as a celebrity defender of integrity, but as a symbol of conscience in commerce. And Chief Justice Roberts' unexpected six-word promise became a defining moment, illustrating that the law at its best can recognize both the letter and the spirit of justice. After the long weeks of negotiation and legal wrangling, Chuck Norris felt a quiet sense of relief. The courtroom lights and flashing cameras had faded, and in their place came a chance to build something new. Titan Fitness, once focused solely on profit and market share, now faced the challenge of restoring its image. Both sides understood that money alone could not heal the wound of broken trust. In homes and gyms across the country, people discussed the case not for its drama, but for its lessons. News anchors recounted how honesty prevailed, and social feeds filled with comments praising transparency. For Chuck, the settlement was less an end than a fresh start. Under the terms of the agreement, Titan Fitness launched a public correction campaign. They retracted exaggerated claims, reprinted product labels, and ran new advertisements highlighting verified benefits. Independent laboratories were commissioned to test supplement formulas, and results were published online. Chuck agreed to contribute his share of the reduced fine to a new nonprofit devoted to scientific literacy and consumer rights. His donation helped fund school programs that taught students how to evaluate health claims critically. Media outlets covered these developments with interest, noting how a single lawsuit had sparked a wave of accountability in an industry too often driven by hype. In law schools around the nation, professors added the Norris Titan case to their syllabi. Students debated the tension between contract sanctity and consumer protection. Moot court competitions staged reenactments of the Supreme Court hearing, challenging future lawyers to balance legal precedent with ethical considerations. Journals published articles examining the implications for contract drafting, suggesting new model clauses to ensure transparency. Legal blogs buzzed with commentary, calling the case a wake-up call for corporations and endorsers alike. Through these academic channels, the story continued to shape thinking about how private agreements should reflect public responsibility. Advertising agencies and marketing departments also took note. New standard contracts began to include clear provisions granting endorsers access to scientific data before campaign launches. Companies realized that celebrity partnerships were built on more than fame. They required shared values and mutual respect. Some brands invited third-party reviewers to vet claims before any public announcement. Others offered more collaborative roles to their spokespeople, recognizing that endorsers who felt heard would speak with genuine conviction. The Norris Titan saga became a blueprint for ethical promotion, a reminder that long-term brand value depended on authenticity. Beyond the boardrooms and classrooms, ordinary people felt empowered. Consumer watchdog groups formed online forums where members shared tips on spotting misleading advertisements. Podcasts dedicated episodes to the case, interviewing experts who explained how to read nutrition labels and assess clinical studies. Fitness influencers began citing the example when discussing supplement choices, urging followers to demand proof of safety and efficacy. In gyms and health clubs, trainers referenced Norris's stand as a lesson in integrity, encouraging clients to question bold marketing messages. The ripple effect reached far beyond any single product or endorsement. At the heart of this change stood Chuck Norris's new foundation, Truth in Action. He traveled to community centers and universities, speaking about the importance of evidence and ethical leadership. His talks blended stories of martial arts discipline with lessons from the courtroom. He invited scientists to join him on stage, conducting simple demonstrations that illustrated how placebo effects could be mistaken for real benefits. In each city, he met with local business owners to discuss fair marketing practices. His genuine enthusiasm and clear passion made these events feel less like celebrity appearances and more like community gatherings. In private moments, Chuck reflected on how far he had come. He remembered the young boy in Oklahoma who first learned a karate block in a dusty studio. He thought of every board he had broken every student whose confidence he had helped build. Now his struggle had shifted from physical challenges to moral ones. He felt proud that he had chosen principle over profit. The settlement and the foundation work gave him a renewed sense of purpose. He planned to write a book about his experiences, blending memoir with practical advice on integrity in all areas of life. For him, the journey was far from over. It was simply taking a new, more meaningful direction. Titan Fitness, for its part, emerged from the ordeal changed. Their new leadership team emphasized transparency in all product lines. They established an advisory board that included independent scientists, consumer advocates, and a representative from Chuck's Foundation. Quarterly reports on product testing became standard, posted on their website for public review. Sales of their supplements gradually recovered, supported by genuine customer trust rather than flashy advertising. Company culture shifted toward collaboration and accountability. Employees spoke of a new pride in their work, knowing that their products were backed by real data and honest communication. The media, too, found a lasting story in the Norris Titan saga. Documentaries aired on streaming platforms featuring interviews with Chuck, Chief Justice Roberts, Titan executives, and consumer activists. These films presented the case as a turning point in the age of information, illustrating how one person's commitment to truth could inspire a movement. Talk shows invited guests from all sides to discuss the broader impact on politics, health, and business. The 6 words Roberts spoke, "But I'll see you in victory," became a memorable tagline, quoted in articles and motivational posters alike. Looking back on the entire saga, it was clear that the real victory lay in shifting norms. Contracts became more than legal tools. They became expressions of shared values. Corporate America learned that secrecy might protect short-term gains, but endangered long-term reputation. Celebrities recognized that lending their name to a product meant accepting responsibility for its claims, and everyday consumers discovered their power to demand honesty. Chuck Norris had stepped into a courtroom expecting a fight but found a platform to champion a deeper cause. In the end, the true legacy of the case was not the dollar amounts or legal opinions, but a renewed belief that integrity and transparency can change the world, one promise at a time.